Hey everybody, how we doing today? It's good to be back and it's good to have internet again. I'm so grateful to have internet again at my house and it's awesome. It's you kind of forget like how good it is to have internet until you don't for a few days and then you're like, how do people live this way? It's challenging, right? So it's all good. So first off, I want to say hi here. We got a hi from Terry. Terry says, hello from Houston. No Christmas weather here. It's 80 outside. Yeah, I've actually got I've got the window open here in the room. It's super nice. I honestly I love this when it happens like this because it's fun to go outside and like I went for like a good run today. So I like that. But here's a big but in church, right? When I've got all these vestments on, and also it's the heat is the functioning system in the church. It just gets, let's say, it just gets a little bit warmer than normal. So that's it's okay. It's all good. Um, let me hold on. I want to see if I can turn off my little background here because that was from last time, and I don't fully need it right now. Settings. There we go. Let's turn off this. Yay. Okay. Back to normal. Back to normal. Don't need that stuff. Yeah. So just for everybody who's popping in here now, we will be good to do today for our Ask a Priest, but this will be our last one until after Christmas time. And there's a couple reasons for that. Most of them are just that Christmas is super duper busy in terms of like parish stuff, but also I will be a little bit out of commission next week. I'm going to have my eyes worked on, so I won't be able to look at a computer screen. So I will not be able to do this, but you can pray for me because it also means that I won't be able to do fun stuff like look at a computer screen or watch TV. So you can think of me not doing those things and I guess being holy and praying for you like I'm supposed to do. So maybe that's God's plan. But we will not have Ask a Priest next week because my eyes won't work, and then we won't have Ask a Priest during the fourth Sunday of Advent because that is crazy time. I don't know if you've looked at your calendars this year, but the fourth Sunday of Advent falling on Christmas Eve is going to be a thing. Let's say it's going to be a thing. I've heard people who are smarter than me tell me there's some way to do it to where like you get both of them done in one mass, but I don't see it. I don't think that doesn't make any sense to me. So long way to say it's going to be really busy, and I think I've got to be careful about my commitments, let's say, those days. So should be good. This is from David. David, it's good to see you. It's good to see you. From Elaine, hello, good to see you from St. Jude. Beautiful place over there. Father Mike's awesome. He's really tall. He's really tall, but he's actually been really good to us younger priests because he's, not only is he older, but he was involved in a lot of writing of the like rules and stuff for how you're supposed to do things in our area. So I give Father Mike a lot of credit because he's nice and actually calls you on the phone, and not people don't always do that. So it's nice, even if you don't always agree, and that's fine. You're not always going to agree. I just think it's really good to have, it's just good to have an older guy who actually is making sure you're not going off the rails. So he's good for that. He's good for that. From Sarah, hello. Yeah, thanks. Prayers for surgery. Yeah, thanks. So yeah, it is kind of ironic. I did schedule it on St. Lucy's feast day, not because I meant to, but because it was supposed to be last Thursday. But I figured, the Immaculate Conception is kind of a really big deal, and I don't want to be out of commission. So this is how ignorant I am about this stuff, right? So I planned on getting this done, right? Getting my eyes fixed. Boop, 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 boop. I can see without glasses. It'll be great, amazing. And then I was like, oh, I'll just be back the next day and have mass, right? And my daily mass crowd kind of laughed at me. They were like, no, you will not be able to see the book. And it's bad that my first thought was not like, oh, you're right. My first thought was like, I've memorized most of the book. This should be okay, right? No, Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that speaks to commitment as a priest. I don't know, but yeah. So long way to say, I was sternly told not to have a big public mass on the day after that. So I won't be doing that. But I ask for your prayers because it's going to be super boring recovering. We've got our big next weekend, next Saturday, we have our parish's big Christmas giveaway where we give away like a week's or 2 weeks worth of food, Christmas gifts, all that stuff to about 25 to 30 local families. And that may not sound like a lot, but when your parish has 100 families, like doing 25 to 30 is really, really kind. So I'm kind of blessed that I won't be able to physically do a ton there, but the good part of this that I'm trying to like get across is it's really good for the parish to learn the mechanics of how these giveaways work, because unfortunately it can kind of sit on the pastor a lot, and it's not. I don't mind the work, but what I think might be a little bit unhelpful for the bigger picture is nobody else knows how to do it. So if something happens to you, like you physically can't do work that day, or God forbid you get moved or something like that happens, you will not be able to, the parish won't be able to keep doing that. And that would be a real tragedy. So I thought, I have trust in our people, and I hope that they get to do their thing. I'll be there praying with people, saying hi, and hopefully trying to be the face of the church, capital C, but we'll see. We'll see. I like this. We all love Father Mike. We look up to him. Yes, we have to. Everyone has to. He's so tall. He's so tall. I like that. Hi, Martha. It's good to see you. Good to see you. Welcome to the show. Sarah says that sounds like an optical illusion. You'll come back the next day. Yeah. Well, so here's a problem. You can't drive. And like everything is far away. So it's not just like getting a ride down the street, like you gotta really do some logistics to get places, but it should work out. Should all be good. I have no idea how any of this works. They sent me like a folder, like literally a folder. Like I felt like I was in third grade again, like a colored folder about like all the things that you can't do and all the things you have to do to get ready, like a scrub. So, whatever. It's all good. I'm going to miss having my glasses, though. They're like a part of me. I just have them off now because they reflect really bad on the screen, and I don't like it. So take those off. From Besotted, yes, prayers for speedy healing. Thank you. Thank you. One of my buddies told me that I was going to freak out, and because, like, he's my buddy and knows me. So it's got me a little bit worried. David, thank you. Appreciate it. Now, let's get to your questions. That's what we came here to do. David's got a good one. David asks, question about the consecration of the wine during Mass. It looks like you're speaking into it like a microphone. Is there a significance to that? All right. So I'm going to get a drink real quick so that I can answer this with caffeine. So what David is referring to is the way that I particularly celebrate Mass. I have to say that this is not something you have to do. If your priest does this or doesn't do it, it is not a reflection of him being holy or being unholy. It's a thing. It's a preference that some guys like. And that is that back in the old days, the rubric said that the rules said that that you were supposed to talk down into the cup, right? So that you were physically speaking almost onto it. There's a cool theological significance to that, though. It's not really for audio, because for a long time this was all done silently. The significance of it is actually the air. Now that might sound a little bit weird till you start thinking about how God does some miracles in the Bible. So how does God create Adam and Eve? It says he breathes the breath of life into them, right? The Spirit hovers over the waters, the breath of God. How does Jesus give the power of the priesthood to his disciples? It says he breathes on them, receive the Holy Spirit. So there's this kind of connection between breathing and power. And so one of the reasons the church used to force priests to physically breathe over the chalice at Mass was this connection that you're kind of acting like Christ. You're using Christ's divine power to do this thing. You're speaking his words with his power. So there was a strong connection between breathing on it and communicating power to it. Now, that still survives under one rule that happens on Holy Thursday morning, or in the Diocese of Lexington on Tuesday of Holy Week, because right? Don't think too hard about it. And that is that when the bishop blesses the chrism oil, the special oil that only the bishop can bless and only on Holy Thursday morning, it says the bishop breathes over it with the sign of the cross. So once again, we have this same thing of the Spirit hovering over the water, of the connection between breath and God's power, right? So for the breath of life in humans is in some way supposed to be a reflection of God's own life, because we have the life of our supernatural soul, but it's also supposed to be this connection that I can act with the power of God. So that's why I do it. That's a really long way to say that's why I do it. If your priest doesn't do it, so what, right? Obviously, it's fine. I just think it's cool and it works for me. And honestly, practical reason for me personally, it gives me something else to look at. Because I don't know if you've ever thought about this. So when you're celebrating Mass as a priest, you're standing out and you see everybody all the time. And sometimes it's not that you don't like people or you don't like looking at them, because obviously you do, but sometimes you just need somewhere else to look for a minute that's natural, right? You don't want to be like that awkward guy who's like only staring up at the sky, because that's ugh. But you also don't want to be the creep who's like looking around into everybody's eyes. That's so it just gives me something else to look at, something else to do. And there is a really cool historical and theological reason to it as well. So there you go. It's a long way to put that, but I hope that helps a little bit. So I want to encourage everybody here that if you have a question, this is a perfect place to put it. So you can ask your questions here. Do my best to give everybody kind of a fair hearing, and they're just do our best to try to help each other. It's not really a competition. It's not a game show. I've seen when I was growing up, they used to have these programs that were like Stump the Priest or Stump the Deacon or whatever. And you're like, I don't think I'm the smartest guy. I just think a lot of people don't get to talk to a priest about stuff they just want to know. And a lot of people don't get a chance to have their questions heard, or unfortunately, a lot of times when they have a question, they're sidelined. And sidelining happens a couple ways. For like a kid, let's say take like a teenager who has questions about like religion and what's true and how do you know this stuff and whatever. And a lot of times people will say, "Oh, we just got to have faith." It's like, well, that doesn't help, does it? What you're telling them is kind of like, forget that question. Don't do that. That's not good. So I'd like to give people those kind of questions, but I also think there's a tendency from priests of a certain age that they themselves don't know things, and so when anyone else asks them something, they make the asker feel dumb, right? Like, oh, the fact that you ask that means that you don't believe in God's mercy. It's like, well, come on, man. I don't claim to be a know-it-all. I don't claim to be one of these priests who's going to sit here and like crack the whip and be like, here's 10 reasons why you're wrong. I just think it's good for people to get a chance to ask their questions and stuff. Sorry for the glare. I got to put my glasses back on. All right. Here's from Besotted. I have a maybe unusual question, maybe not. I don't know. Is it unusual or someone to report that they have visitations from angels, archangels, the Blessed Mother, or the Lord Jesus? Well, so let's be careful about how we use the word unusual, right? First thought. So if we mean, is it a thing that happens with a frequency? Is it something that most people experience? Well, obviously, no, right? It's not something that frequently happens to people. Is it bad unusual? If that's the real question, like, is it unhealthy? Is it what's up, right? Not necessarily. I think it has to be tested. So one of the things church talks about a lot is that there's two kinds of ways that God can speak to us. One of them is authoritative and definitive. The other is not. Right? So let's be clear. So on the one hand, we have what's called public revelation or capital T tradition. These are things that God has revealed for everybody and they're necessary for salvation, right? So the creed, the church, the sacraments, morality, that kind of thing, right? Boom. We know that this is from God and we know that it's for everybody. So I can't say like, well, here's a good one that a lot of Catholics, unfortunately, have done for a while. Is we say, oh well, we teach that contraception's bad, but for you, that's up to you. Like, well, no, that's really not what the deposit of faith is, right? The deposit of faith is really that I believe that this is from God, and I believe that the church teaches it from God, and so I have a lot of mercy, I have a lot of feeling, I have a lot of understanding for people, but I can't say that the church is wrong. You know what I mean? But on the other hand, there's what's called private revelation. And that's what you're describing here. And that's where God reveals himself specifically to one person and gives them a message for them. So let's be very clear. There's always going to be in these cases, right, where Mary appears or where people have visions of Jesus or some angel or something. There's usually some kind of like general thing. So like take the Divine Mercy with St. Mary Faustina. Obviously, Jesus wants everybody to know that he is merciful, right? Take Our Lady of Fatima. Obviously, every Christian needs to think more about praying and repenting of their sins, right? A lot of times these visions will have somebody seeing a vision of hell and all that, right? So the idea is, once again, like we already believe this stuff. It's just trying to help people deal with it now, either when faith is weak or when people just have a hard time getting around there, right? So what I would say, though, is the same thing that St. Paul says. He says that in cases like this, where someone's, receiving some, let's say a special message, a special experience of God, we want to be careful. And the reason we want to be careful is because it's also possible that it is not from God. And it can be not from God in a couple ways, right? So number one, there's always the danger of what I call it's the Christmas Carol phenomenon. Do you remember the very beginning of the Christmas Carol by Dickens? When Scrooge sees Marley, his business partner, when he sees him coming up from the grave with all his like chains and stuff on him, he says, "How do I know that you're real and not a bit of badly digested potato?" Right? This kind of thing can happen, right? That there can be situations where people have a psychological thing. And it's not to say you're mentally ill. It's just something can happen, right? You can be deprived of sleep for a long time. You could have taken a medication that hit you in a weird way. You might be having a health problem, right? So we always want to make sure that's not what's going on, because those are hallucinations. And while hallucinations are, like I said, they're not always bad, especially when they confer a psychological comfort, but they're not to be taken as definitive, or they're not going to be they shouldn't be taken as coming from God. But the other thing which we want to be afraid of is also the fact that Scripture teaches that the devil can disguise himself as an angel of light. So it's possible sometimes that some of these visions are not from God, but they're from the enemy. And that's why the church always says that we ought to test them. That's why these visions and these experiences are tested by the church. So I would say, first off, if that's happening, find a way to make sure it's getting tested. But also, if you're reading somebody else, always take this stuff cautiously. I know it's tempting, and I know that like when we can't see God, or when we don't feel really built up in our faith, or we feel the world around us is kind of hostile, it can be tempting to look to things like these visions, these miracles, these revelations to strengthen our faith. And that's good. That's what they're supposed to do. But let's always just take that with some caution. I know there's people who take Marian apparitions with more weight than the gospel. And that's not what the Blessed mother wants, and it's definitely not what the church wants. So that's a really long way to say that, but I hope that that's a little bit of clarity on what's going on there. It's not unusual necessarily in terms of bad, but it does need to be tested. So there you go. It's from Terry. How does the bishop know how much chrism oil to consecrate on Holy Thursday, since he has to distribute it to all the parishes in the diocese? All right. I got to be on the inside of this. I know how the sausage is made, Terry, so I'll do my best to break it down, because I like this part, honestly, but I know some people don't, so that's okay. So first, how do we start? So we start with the number of, it's not just parishes, right? So we have parishes, we have missions, we have sometimes hospitals, we can have sometimes a Catholic school. It just depends, right? So certain chapels might have these, certain ones don't. It's just one of those things that the diocese knows about. Once again, don't think too hard about it. Don't get into the whole like, well, they shouldn't or they should. Like, oh, just that's somebody else's problem. It's not ours. So what we do, you start at the beginning and we see how many of these institutions, plural, need oils. So you always need new chrism oil every year because the old ones are supposed to be disposed of, right? So let's say we have, let's make up a number, 75 institutions. Let's say we have 75 institutions in the diocese that have holy oils there, okay? That would include hospitals, chapels, parishes, missions, all that stuff. Okay. So what we do is we are going to buy little containers. They look like, that fake vanilla? Like when you go to Walmart, you get like the fake vanilla and it comes in like a little plastic jar kind of thing, like a little plastic jug. So we're going to buy a certain number of little plastic jugs. So if we have 75 institutions, we're going to multiply the volume of that little plastic jug by 75. And that's the minimum amount of chrism we need. So we're going to consecrate that number plus a buffer. So let's say like I know our cathedral, obviously, if you consecrate this much chrism for the cathedral, it's not going to be enough. If you consecrate this much chrism for a mission, it's going to be way too much. So what we do is for the bigger churches, they get these big glass kind of things, right? And those hold quite a bit of chrism oil. So the long and the short of it is like there is a math equation to make sense of it. And I know this because we go out and get all the little like jugs of olive oil and we got to like pour them. And I like it, but I like kitchen work. I like working in restaurants. I like cooking. So it's a lot like that, especially when it's not consecrated and you're not so worried about it like spilling, I know in our diocese, what we do is we pour the, we've got it all, there's a whole system to this. So it's important to remember oils are sacramentals, right? They're not sacraments. So we want to be careful and treat them with respect, but also it's not like you're spilling the precious blood. So, you know what I mean? It's just one of those things. Chrism's tough though. Chrism's tough because you definitely don't want to spill it because it's hard to make. You can only make it once a year. So anyway, thanks for that question. Good question. From Abraham Diaz. What would you say to single men that desire to have a girlfriend but gets rejected multiple times? Should he keep pursuing to know a girl or should he pursue a vocation of celibate life instead? Well, let me think. I'm probably not the right guy for relationship advice, obviously. But I would say this. Don't get narrow in your thinking. So what you said here, so should you pursue a vocation or run after a girl? I don't know that those two are necessarily like polar opposites in the sense that like if you get rejected, you get rejected, right? You got to move on. You got to pick yourself up. And I know that's hard. That's tough on a lot of guys. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're never going to find anybody. It doesn't mean, oh, well, it's because I was supposed to be a priest. it doesn't mean that you're a failure. So what you got to do is you got to remember what gives your life meaning. And whether you're in the happiest marriage in the world or whether you're a celibate dude or whatever, you're still you. And until you're happy with you, no vocation is going to make you magically content. So one thing that you can do that I know 100% is within the helpful boundaries is to work on yourself, right? It doesn't mean like, oh, you're damaged goods and the reason they reject you is because you're terrible. No, it's just you can work on yourself. You can be happy with who you are. You can be happy with the person God has called you to be. You can grow in holiness. You can grow in virtue. Do those things. Do those things. I just don't, I think it can get dangerous when we start to take our failures as like indicative of what we're supposed to do. I think you just got to learn from your failures, be willing to move on, and not let it destroy your sense of identity. Not let it destroy who you are. You're called to be something different. So yeah, that's my best advice. Be good to yourself, be patient with yourself, and don't feel like you're terrible, because you're not. Just work on yourself and be happy with who God's made you to be, because that's how you're going to feel no matter where you end up. It's from Eloise. Does His Holiness the Pope know the time of the end of the world? I remember at school, people used to say that this was revealed as one of the secrets of Fatima. No. The Pope does not know the end of the world. And the reason that I am very certain of that is that the gospel itself refuses to share any of that. So if the end of the world was something that ought to be known, I don't think Jesus would say neither the Son knows it, right? He claims that he doesn't want to act like he knows it either. Now, there's a lot of Christology here about what the humanity of Jesus versus the divinity of Jesus, and which one knows, which one. Just take him at his word. Just take him at his word. He's like, listen, this isn't something people need to know. So if that's true, I don't think these secrets of Fatima are going to be like that. I really don't. And the reason I say that is because I was just talking about private revelation just a little bit before. And one of the things that's really important is that private revelation is always for the person who receives it. So even if these secrets of Fatima are real, and let's say you just say, I don't want to believe that. I don't want to fool with that. You are totally within bounds to say that. You're totally within bounds to say, I don't care about the secrets of Fatima. Not because you don't care about Mary, but because it's not part of the deposit of faith. And it's not part of the creed. So the fact that people would say like, oh, the Pope knows this, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. I don't think so. I think the Pope would act very differently if he knew the end of the world. And I think the church would be in a very different place if we knew the end of the world. And we seem to be on the same track we've always been on before Fatima, which is bent on self-destruction and imploding. So I don't know. By the way, when I say that, I don't mean to be negative. I'm thinking of a conversation between Napoleon and one of the cardinals. And the Emperor Napoleon told one of these cardinals, he said, if I wanted to, I could destroy your Catholic Church within a few years. And the cardinal smiled at him and he goes, well, Napoleon, I wish you the best of luck, but I don't think that you'll be able to do in a few years what us churchmen have been unable to do in 1700 years, right? We've been desperately trying to find a way to break this, and God still seems to keep it safe. So I kind of think that if we knew more, maybe things would make more sense. And I don't see it. And it doesn't match up with what I understand of the gospel. So that's my best take on that. All right. This is from Sarah. There's an observation. Wonder Woman has lasso of truth for no-gooders. Over the years, I've noticed the rosary is the true lasso where truth is revealed through the intercession of Our Lady into the life of Christ. That is an interesting thought. I've actually been reading a book about mediation, and that sounds like I thought it was going to be an abstract topic, and I really got it to be like boring. Not like bad boring, but like, okay, this isn't the kind of topic I'm pumped about. But as I was reading it, the lady, her name's Edith Humphrey. She's an Orthodox theologian. She's great. 10 out of 10. I love this woman's thought is incredible. She's so good. You should go read Mediating the Immediate God. That's her book. But she talks about prayers to the Mother of God, and she talks about like why we do this and how we do this, and she really situates all of Christianity within this idea of mediation, that we're in this together, and that when we pray with Mary, we're being connected to Christ, that God himself always gives himself through this mediation of other people. And I don't know, I think the rosary is awesome. I love it. I'm bad at it, but anybody that's praying the rosary is going to make me happy. By the way, side note, since we're talking about the rosary, I can brag real quick on my parish. We our Knights of Columbus asked if we could start like a first Saturday rosary, which used to be a traditional thing, and everybody did it, and it kind of fell to the side. But the Knights asked if we could do a first Saturday rosary, and I was like, well, yeah, absolutely, you could do a first Saturday rosary. And I've really been blown away at having like 15, 16, 17 people show up just on a random. We didn't do it this week, obviously we did it last week, but having 15, 16 people show up in a parish of 100 families just to say the rosary, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I wish our parishes did more rosary stuff. I wish we did more devotion, right? Just like teaching people how to pray, statues. Like we have a beautiful statue of Mary in our church, moved her to the front of the church for the Immaculate Conception. I just think all of these things, they help people see Christ more clearly, and we're just bad at it, and I wish we weren't. So there's my Sarah. That's my observation. There you go. All right, this is from Nathan. Hi, Father. I'm a young teen. I love the Latin Mass, but location is limited. The nearest one is an SSPX chapel. Can I receive the Eucharist from them? Hi, Nathan. Congratulations on loving God. I want to start you there. Good job. I'm glad you like the Latin Mass. I think that's awesome. I wish I was a sayer of the Latin Mass for a while, and I was asked to stop after the they call it the Pope's thing, where they made it sort of complicated to do. All right, so the SSPX, I would say it's probably not good to go there. It's probably not good, and we're not able to receive communion from them because they are in a state of it's not open schism, but they're definitely not in unity with the church. So receiving communion where there is a lack of communion is not really our jam, right? Think about it a bit like an Orthodox church. Like something's off here. I don't think it means you could. I'm trying to be careful here. I struggle to see why. I don't know. Here's let me rewind. My experience of working with people in the SSPX showed me something that I didn't realize, and that was that I thought about them a bit like a block, right? Like they all believe these things, but from working with them, you see that it's very varied. There are a lot of them who want to be very faithful. They want to be in communion with the Pope, and they want to do their best to be Catholic, right? That doesn't bother me so much. But I've also seen the other side that gives me the heebie-jeebies. The other side of that I've seen where they make Catholics who join them redo the sacraments, right? Rebaptism, reconfirmation. Like that's sacrilege and really bad doctrine, like really, really bad doctrine. And so I just personally find from having worked with them and stuff, I don't trust their doctrine. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because people are like, oh my gosh, the Latin Mass, they're amazing. You're like, their Mass is probably done well. I'm not going to speak badly about their celebration of the Mass. But the things they believe, and it's not like, oh, well, Vatican II. No. Like these are old school, like really old traditional doctrines that they've kind of stomped all over. So I would recommend not being a part of that. I know that's hard, and I'm sorry. I don't want to be especially where the Latin Mass is it's a neat thing, and it's a part of your faith. What I would recommend though is maybe getting a those old missals, like the little like daily Mass missals, and praying along with that. Or if you want to get a hold, I don't know what your grasp on Latin is, but maybe getting a hold of some of the old prayer books that the priests used to use and just getting familiar with how those go, and then kind of trying to make that a part of your life as best you can. But I know that God understands and know that God wants to foster the good thing going on. So I hope that's helpful. I'm sorry. I wish I had more to say. I just don't know the rules. I don't want to say the wrong thing. But thanks for your love of God, and thanks for your question. This is a good question, Elaine. How does a person request a plan for a funeral? Would pre-plan a funeral home just get up with the church request that when a person passes away? Well, so it depends. It really depends. I'll tell you as a priest what happens most of the time. What I tell people, I hate this because it always means you're telling somebody who's going to die, right? It literally always means somebody's going to die, and you don't, it's not good. Okay, here's what I say. In terms of pre-planning, the most helpful thing is going to be picking out a burial vessel. So whether you're going to be cremated in an urn, right? Or if you're going to be buried, picking out a casket, working out some of the details of the funeral that are important to you. So let's say I've had this both ways with good Catholics. Good Catholics say, Father, absolutely, I want a funeral mass. We're going to do it in the church. Great, happy to do it. No problem, right? I've had other good Catholics who might be like the only Catholic in their family, or there's a lot of family like infighting and drama, and they'll say, Father, I want to have the funeral at the funeral home, and I'd like you to say a mass later with the church. Just knowing that that's where they're at helps me a lot. Now, in terms of all the nitty gritty, like what readings and song and who's going to do what, I mean, if you want to plan it, great. If you don't worry about that stuff. I think big block stuff, like asking the priest, like, Father, when I die, would you do my funeral? Or when mom dies, will you do her funeral? That's a great start, right? You don't got to sit there with like a whole plan and be like, well, we're going to have this person's going to read and like, I want this psalm. If you want to do that, go for it. But I just don't want people to feel like they have to. The reason for pre-planning, I mean, like, so as a priest, I had to pre-plan my own funeral. The reason for pre-planning is not to I don't know, customize everything. Maybe the idea with pre-planning is just to take the burden off other people. And so if you do a lot of the big lifting, you've got the plot, you've got the burial vessel, you've got, we're going to do it at the funeral home, we're going to do it at the church. That's 90% of it. The details are easily filled in. I actually had one guy, and God bless him, when he passed away, he had written down like the songs he wanted for his funeral on the back of another one of those little funeral visiting cards. So when he died, I just took that and did my best to do those things. Like, oh, he wants these songs. Okay. I'm certainly not going to say no to that, but I just think let's be realistic about what's most important, and then everything kind of as we can. Danny Hernandez, it's good to see you, man. How you been? Oh, this is a good one. Canadian Contrarian. By the way, I love your name. That's a great name. 10 out of 10. Jesus says plainly, call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father, which is in heaven. And yet so many call the pontiff such. How is that? Okay, great question. Thanks for asking that. Okay, so first off, let's remember that Jesus there is talking about something that shows up elsewhere in the New Testament, speaking particularly of St. Paul, right? Where Paul tells people he is their father in Christ. So the idea of using the word father, I mean, I can take it or leave it. It's not going to kill me. Someone decides, like, if the church tomorrow said, okay, we don't call our priest father, I mean, fine, whatever. It's more just a reference to what Paul says, where he says that he is their father in Christ Jesus. And it's based in the idea of what we believe our clergy actually do, right? That yes, we're a role model. Yes, we preach the word. Yes, we do our best to encourage people in the word. But we also kind of give birth to the word. We are human ambassadors for Christ, like Paul says, that somehow through our silliness, we make the kingdom present. And like Jesus says, he who hears you hears me. So I think we have to be careful of reading this, because Christ isn't really, if he says the very use of the word Father is wrong, well, Paul's out too. And I don't think that's a situation that we want to be in. In terms of like the pontiff, though, like the Pope, where people will call him the Holy Father, it's just that's a title of honor. I wouldn't think too much about it. It's not saying that, it's not trying to replace the role of God the Father. The Pope in no way replaces the role of God. So and anyone who thinks the Pope replaces God is not a good Catholic. I'll tell you that. So, but by the way, I do love your username. Thanks for popping in, and it's good to see a believer asking questions. Thank you for your witness of faith. What's a Catholic doesn't want a funeral at all? Well, so unfortunately, we do need to do something. We do need to do something, just because we pray for the dead, and we've always prayed for the dead. And Jesus himself was a part of funeral stuff, right? Lazarus's death. Jesus is attending the funerals when he walks into town, like of the widow of Nain. There's, from the very beginning, one of the earliest things we have of prayers are the church's prayers for the departed, for those who have died. Incidentally, though, so this is a good question. So what's a Catholic who doesn't want a funeral at all? I actually have an answer for that, and it's a martyr. It's a martyr. We have generally not done funerals like that, specifically like praying for them, for the martyrs, because the martyrs pray for us, right? So I don't know how that works today, because I've never had a martyr, but back in the old days, if somebody was killed for their witness to Christ or the gospel, they did not receive funeral rites in the same way. And that wasn't because we were trying to shame them. It was because, like, well, they're better than us, so who are we to try to funeral them? You know what I mean? So yeah, that's just how it is. Just great question, though. By the way, I have to say, I got to go down to the catacombs while I was in Rome. I got to go down a couple times, and catacombs are stinky and really, really humid. And did I mention stinky? Right? They're what they are, right? It's because there's a lot of dead bodies in there, and that smells bad. So the idea that the catacombs are like this great little like gathering spot for believers and stuff, like I have a hard time seeing it. Maybe they said mass at the martyrs' tombs, but it smelled really bad, and it was hot, and the authorities knew where they were, so they weren't like secret. So I don't know. Just a fun little trivia question. This is from JR. Hey, JR, it's good to see you. Greetings from Lexington. Eulogies, yay or nay? Better at a vigil. Okay, so here's my take. I am never going to go in and be like, absolutely not, under no circumstances. I always tell families my preference, and I think you're like kind of spot on there. Is it better at the vigil? Yes, I think it's better at the vigil, and here's why. The vigil. So, okay, the church thinks of the vigil as like a time where we get together, and, you know, a lot of people pray the rosary, or some people who are really devout will have like the office of the dead. Great, fine, whatever. I actually find for most families, the visitation kind of takes the role of like a celebration of life. You know, this is where we talk about all the memories, and we cry, we enjoy, you know, being together and mourning this person that's gone. There's snacks, at least in Eastern Kentucky, there's a lot of food. So what I find is actually that the vigil is probably a really good time to do that, because it's kind of what we're doing, right? Unfortunately, I know a lot of families, like, visitations are so unstructured that they just end up kind of shaking hands by the casket. And there's something to be said about a receiving line. But I just find, like, putting all that on one day sort of helps us separate the different parts of funerals. I had one where a lady here passed away, and they wanted to do, she was kind of an outdoorsy type. And so what they wanted to do was, instead of doing eulogies during the mass and the funeral, they wanted to put together something outside on the church lawn. And they had like a bunch of pictures of all the hikes she went on and her kids, and her widowed husband was there. And it was cool. They had music and food, and I thought it was awesome. It's like, I'm not here to rain on your parade. We're not here to say, no, you can't say that. It's just, I kind of feel like it's good to let the mass be the mass. It's good to let the church part be the church part. And it's good to let the people part be the people part, if that makes sense. But I have had people in the past who really, 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 really want to do a eulogy at the funeral mass. And my only thing I ask is that I get a chance to look it over. And that's got two kind of hooks in it. And I'm sure you might know this if you've ever worked in a church in your entire life. So the first one is, okay, we want to make sure that this is going to be reasonably long or short. We don't want this to be a 30-minute kind of talk. And that's not that we don't care about the person. It's just like, we need a little bit of boundaries on that. But the other thing I've run across is what I call like inappropriate stuff. So on the one hand, we got to be really sensitive to the fact that we can't have somebody using a Catholic pulpit to teach something that the Catholic Church doesn't teach. That would, like, so sometimes you'll have people be like, I know, the church talks about heaven, but I believe she's back again as a sea otter. And you're like, you can't say that from our pulpit. You're undermining everything we're doing. Right. So there's that. I had one situation when I was in Jenkins where a guy was like super intoxicated, and he decided to just stand up and start talking about the demons that were over in like the nun's house. And I eventually had to stand up and be like, that's enough. We're done here. Right. Super uncomfortable. Don't recommend it. But the other thing I found that's not really theologically heavy, but matters, is sometimes people have a way of saying things that are embarrassing about the deceased. So they might think they're telling a funny story about like the time they caught mom drinking a whole bottle of wine, right? But it's really not funny when she's dead, and it's really not funny in front of a bunch of strangers who don't know that about her, Or you'll have people who try to stir up kind of family drama in a eulogy. So I just have them write it out so that I can give it a once over and make sure that it's all helpful. But yeah. Jay, I'm so sorry. I didn't know about your parents passing. I'm sure, it doesn't sound like it was recent, but absolutely. You guys are in my prayers for sure. All right, everybody. I think this is probably it for now. Keep me in your prayers. Like I said, this will be the last time I have glasses. Next time I'll have normal eyes. But we won't be on until after Christmas, but I will see you again after Christmas. So until then, hope you have a wonderful, blessed Advent, Merry Christmas, and I will see you on the other side. Take care and God bless you.